So my video is on the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People. It was founded on February 12, 1909, and what really pushed this organization to actually form was when in 1908 a violent mob had attacked black residents in Springfield, Illinois. So there were white social activists that reached out to African Americans after the mob happened, and they were socialist William English Walling, settlement house worker Mary White Ovington, Jewish social worker Henry Moskowitz, and Oswald Garrison, who was the editor of The Nation. Also, a black sociologist called William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, who later became the organization's first president, joined the NAACP because he saw it as a way to secure the rights of all blacks, as it was stated in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So white progressives were mostly the ones in charge of leading the African Americans, and they were based in New York City. So W.E.B. Du Bois was the one who was dealing with most of the publicity because he was the editor of the journal called The Crisis. And this journal promoted civil rights activism while also highlighting any black art, writing, and poetry that contradicted any stereotypes made against African Americans. And then by 1914, The Crisis had a monthly circulation of about 35,000 copies. Also that same year, the organization spread across the nation and had 50 branches established with 6,000 members. So African Americans were a majority of the members, while in the era of World War I, James Weldon Johnson and Walter White became national leaders of the organization. Also, the organization relied on black women at a branch level. There was this one woman called Ida B. Wells Barnett, an anti-lynching activist, and she did express that she felt dismissed by male black leaders and white female progressives inside the organization. Even though this was happening, there was also another organization mostly run by women of color that was called the National Association of Colored Women, which supported NAACP through fundraisers and membership drives. And then Juanita Jackson Mitchell and Ella Baker, while others like them as well, soon became important staff members in the NAACP. By 1929, the organization was well known, and that was the same year that Martin Luther King Jr. was born. His father was on the executive committee in the Atlanta branch, and then later in 1944, Martin Luther King Jr. was on the youth membership committee of the Atlanta NAACP Youth Council. And then throughout the 20th century, the organization was against lynching, and it did anything possible to stop them. In the 1920s and 30s, they were lobbying for anti-lynching bills, but it wasn't really affected because Congress didn't do anything. So then they later moved on to political pressure and legal campaigns. So many prominent figures throughout the 20th century had some influence in the NAACP, even though it was for a short time, they did help in a way. There were people like Rosa Parks, President Dwight Eisenhower, and President Richard Nixon that did help somewhat for the organization. And of course, as in all things, there were some negative views made against the group. They were called narrow-minded and an elitist group. There were also some organizations that kind of were branched off of NAACP, and so at the beginning they were kind of in the same views and they fought for the same things, but then later on they had just opposing views, and that created some tension between them. And then to this day, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is still a thing, and it still spreads its influence.